What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's transfer tips for Game Week 32. So I'm going to go through some of the players that people are considering taking out of their squads and maybe putting in as well and give you my opinion. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. And if you want to check out your suggested transfers, make sure to click those links in the description to Fantasy Football Hub. There's a 7-day free trial at the moment and 30% off. You can take a look at that tool plus all the other ones they've got. Like I said, links in the description. All right, let's start with some of the big news from last night, and that is that Erling Haaland was benched for Man City against Aston Villa and didn't play a single minute, which is not great if you own him, unless, of course, you've got Jammy like me and you've got Zabani 7 points coming off the bench. But that aside, it's not ideal for a £14.3 million player to miss out, and you don't want that threat of rotation moving forward. Now, I don't think for 1 second Haaland has now become a rotation-prone player, right? He's not going to start missing every other game. But it has shown that Pep is willing to rest him as needed. As far as we know, it wasn't injury related. FPL Main Road on Twitter that leaked that Haaland was starting last night said it wasn't injury related. So it does look like it was a rest. That's the first time, as far as I'm aware, that he's been rested in the Premier League for Man City since he came to the club. So including last season as well. The only times he's missed games are through injury, the first game back after injury, and towards the end of last season when the league was won and they were still in Europe. He has played matches and come off quite early, like 50th, 60th minute, even at half-time against Leicester last year in between the Champions League matches, but he hasn't not started a game. So that shows that Pep is willing to do that. Why was it last night? Possibly because of the schedule that's coming up. Maybe it was tactical against Aston Villa. I certainly don't think he's going to miss Palace away. I think he will start that game. I think that's pretty much guaranteed. And it's also the first game of Game Week 32, so we'll probably get a leak anyway. But if Pep was to bench him again twice in a row, then you start getting a lot of questions being asked. Are Man City better without? Why have you benched him 2 games in a row? You're not happy with him. I just don't think Pep would let that happen. So I think it's pretty clear to me that it will start in Game Week 32. Now, what do you do with him moving forward? That probably depends what situation you're in right now. If you don't own him, it's probably quite easy to go without in 32 and just reassess ahead of Game Week 33. Whatever reason you don't own him for, maybe you sold him ahead of blank Game Week 29, maybe you used him to fund the move for Salah in Game Week 31, you can probably go without this week because there's other captain opportunities. I think Haaland's a good captain, by the way, against Palace, but you've got Son against Forest at home, Palmer against Sheffield United away, Salah against Man United away. There's plenty of other players that you could go for. So he's not really a must-have this week. If you've set yourself up where you've got the money to do it in one move without a hit, or you've got an injury or something like that, I still think it's okay to bring him in for what it's worth. Of course, right? I still think he's a good option moving forward, but there's no rush to do it, I would say. And then you can reassess ahead of Luton at home. Now, before he got rested against Villa, I was fairly confident he would start that Luton match. And I still think that's the case, but obviously it has spooked me last night, his benching and the fact he didn't come on for any minutes. And it is smack bang between the 2 Real Madrid games. So I do think it's a worry. So I think people without him might just look to go through up until maybe closer to the double game week that they will have in Game Week 37. I think it would be surprising if he also missed Luton. To miss 2 out of 3 league games, I'm just not sure Pep would do that. Also, we were assuming it was just a rest last night. It probably was, but maybe it was tactical because the reverse fixture against Villa this season wasn't Man City's greatest game. And Pep does think about what happens in previous matches against teams, or I'm sure most managers do. Haaland's record's pretty good as far as I'm aware against Palace. And obviously he absolutely smashed Luton in the FA Cup. So I think he's going to start, but obviously I can't now be as confident as I was this time last week. So I think it's fair game to go without him. If you own him, I still think the discussion is pretty similar to last week. Like, what are you gaining from getting rid of him? Obviously, if he keeps getting benched, there's a massive gain to be had by selling. But I don't think that's going to happen. So I think it's a pretty easy decision to keep him for Palace and then probably for Luton as well. And then reassess moving forward depending on what your chip strategy is. Like for me, for example, I might sell him in 34 because I'm dead ending, bring in a double game week player. But then I'm definitely wildcarding him back in for 35 onwards. It's just whether or not you captain him in 33. And obviously we can have that discussion ahead of that deadline. So I think if you don't own him, it's more than reasonable to keep going without for now. And if you do own him, I think you hold on to him. Like for most people, the time to buy Salah was last week. So hopefully you've already done that, in which case you don't need to get rid of Haaland for funds. And I can't imagine there's too many other players that you're kind of desperate to bring in that would make sense to sell Haaland for. So, yeah, I think maybe go without if you don't own him, unless you were setting up a transfer in which case go for it. And if you've got him, you probably keep hold. I think it's almost certain he starts against Palace. Like I said, we'll probably get a leak. And the game in 33, by the way, is 3 o'clock against Luton on Saturday. The first kickoff is 12:30, which is Newcastle versus Spurs. So we might get a leak in Game Week 33 as well, which is obviously help. And if he is benched against Luton, maybe then you can set yourself up for a nice transfer out. But I think for now, you probably just keep holding him. He's not going to keep blanking. I mean, I spoke last week, right, that it's only 2 game weeks that he's actually blanked, which is Liverpool and Arsenal. And obviously this is now a 3rd game week as well, but he didn't even play. So it feels like forever since he got a return. But it's only 2 game weeks he's actually played. And obviously you had the international break and blank game week 29. So I know for some people it's going to feel like, well, you're just holding on to him. He's no longer a good option. But I think he's only a bad option if you think he's going to keep getting rested. And personally, I just don't think that's going to happen. So talking of players that didn't play a single minute in game week 31, Bukayo Saka wasn't even in the squad for Arsenal against Luton. He does seem to have a bit of an issue ongoing at the moment. This is what Arteta has said. He was close, but he felt again something in a very similar area against City, and it was a very short turnaround. Hopefully he can train today and be available for the weekend. So he hasn't been completely ruled out of Brighton away in game week 32, but he's also not been completely past fit yet. We will hear from Arteta again on Friday. The clue was, by the way, that Saka was seen in training. That should have told us that he wasn't going to play. Because often when there's an injury doubt, Arsenal keep players out of training photos and then they end up playing. So we should have known, really. I was quite confident, I will say, on his minutes last week. That did get a little bit less so as we got closer to the deadline. But I still didn't think it was a good time to bench him or sell him. And obviously I was maybe wrong about that. But either way, he didn't play. So if you had someone on the bench, they would have come on. What do you do with him moving forward? I think it's a very similar situation to Haaland. If you don't own him, it's perfectly fine to keep going without him for now. Brighton away, Villa at home are not bad fixtures for an attacker, but he's not essential for those games either. And in game week 34, if you're free hitting, you don't need to worry about Saka now. You can just bring him in 34 if he looks fully fit, or if not, go for someone else instead. If you don't own him, if you do own him, I should say, I would probably keep hold of him, because the thing is, if he comes back in and continues to start every single match, he's still a really good option, right? His minutes are generally good. He's on penalties as well. His underlying numbers are proper decent too. There's just no real reason to rush out and sell him. And the reason, and look, I was confident last week and I was completely wrong, but I am quietly confident about him starting against Brighton. And the reason is I don't think it's a major injury. And the fact that Arteta kept him completely out of the squad against Luton maybe isn't quite so much of a concern because of the other players he rested in that game. Now, it does look on paper like a completely different side for Arsenal, and they did make a lot of changes, but ultimately Trossard on the left is not really a major shock, right? Because Martinelli is not long back from injury. Nelson obviously played instead of Saka, and then it was Partey and Smith-Rowe instead of Rice and Jorginho, I guess. Everyone else is pretty much set and would usually be in the 11s, Zinchenko in for Kivior or whatever, really. But the fact that he benched Rice kind of showed that he thought he could beat Luton, obviously, without them, and that seemed like the best time to give them a rest, because they, like Man City, are obviously still in the Champions League. So in between, I think it's Brighton and Villa, they've also got Bayern Munich. But I just don't think those kind of changes are going to happen that often. I think Declan Rice, while the title race is still on, I wouldn't be surprised if he plays every other game now, because Brighton away, Villa at home, Wolves away, Chelsea at home, Spurs away are all much tougher than Luton at home. The next time I would maybe see Arsenal resting players like they did against Luton would possibly be Bournemouth at home in 36. But at that point, you're so close to the end of the season. If the title is still open, you're going to play those players if they can get on the pitch and if they're not got like a super bad injury or anything like that. So I think the fact that Rice also got rested made me a little bit less concerned about the fact that Saka wasn't even in the squad. But obviously there is an issue there, right? I do think that is legit. I think we have to assume that at this point. So yeah, for me, if you don't own him, I wouldn't bring him in for game week 32. I would see what happens and hope that he continues to get managed minutes. If you have got him, I'd probably just keep him and start him. Unless Arteta says something on Friday that changes my mind on that. That is what I'll be doing. The key thing will be, if Saka's spotted in training again, there's loads of pictures coming out. That might worry me a little bit, but I think he'll be in that team for game week 32. All right, let's talk about Phil Foden next. Nearly 100,000 transfers in already this week. And my main advice moving forward for FPL would be don't sell a player before they're about to score a hat-trick. It's a less than ideal strategy and something that I did in Game Week 31. I'll talk about my team a bit more tomorrow once all the matches are finished. But essentially, I took a -4 to have Darwin Núñez against Sheffield United at home instead of Foden against Aston Villa at home. So now I need Darwin Núñez to go massive tonight, and he might not even start. So that's not great. And not only have I sold Foden for a hit before a hat-trick, I benched his hat-trick that he got a few weeks ago as well. So me and him have not done well in terms of FPL points overall. But either way, right, thinking about him as an option moving forward, why are so many people bringing him in? Well, one, he's great. Two, his minutes look good, and the fixtures are decent as well. Palace away, Luton at home, Brighton away, and Forest away. The question is, will he get rotated at some point over the next few games? And look, maybe Haaland's benching against Villa was tactical, but ultimately I feel like if you're going to bench Haaland, then Pep could bench anyone. And that's something we've kind of known for a long time now. So it is possible that Phil Foden gets a bench in over the next few games, but it's not guaranteed. It might be that Pep Guardiola rests him in terms of managing his minutes. So maybe in the 60th minute against Palace and Luton, he comes off. If that was the case, I think most people that own Foden would absolutely take that. So I don't mind him as a transfer in. Pep did speak after the game, I think it was, last night about the minutes of his players over the international break. And he said players like Walker and Stone started both games for England, and obviously they got injured. Foden played both games for England as well. That's why he felt we had to take him off against Arsenal, because he was absolutely knackered. He might take an opportunity over the next few games to rest him completely and take him out of that first 11. It's a possibility. For what it's worth, though, I'd actually be pretty confident as a Foden owner. The reason is, I think he's first choice wide player. So I think he's ahead of Doku and Grealish. I think that's pretty clear. Obviously, he can play on the left and on the right. But also, Kevin De Bruyne's minutes are being managed, as we've seen since he came back from injury. And that is going to continue. I don't think we're going to see Kevin De Bruyne playing, 3, 4, 5 games in a row at all this season. So Foden's also, when De Bruyne is out, is also ahead of him centrally as well. So that's why I think his minutes will actually continue to be pretty good. So if you own him, you're absolutely not selling. That is an easy choice. But you could look to go and buy him ahead of Palace away. Again, that fixture is the first game of 32, so we'll probably get a leak anyway if you're around at deadline. And then for 33, it's the 3 o'clock game, so you might get some information. In which case, you probably just, bring him in if that's who you want. I guess, as always, right, it depends who you're taking out. Would I do Saka to Foden this week? Probably not. But a different midfielder, if you're not happy with them, you could look to move him on. And I think long term, not only are the fixtures pretty good for Man City in the short term, long term they've got that extra fixture in Game Week 37 as well. So the one that's scheduled right now is Fulham away, and the one that would go in there is Spurs away. So potentially longer term, from say Game Week 35, it's Forest away, Wolves away, double game week of Fulham and Spurs away, and then West Ham at home, last game of the season. I think essentially, as longer term picks, anyone from kind of Man City, Arsenal, Liverpool, etc., a lot is going to depend on the title race and whether they're still in European competitions. If we get to game weeks 36, 37 and the league is over, which looks very unlikely, it has to be said given how tight it is, and City is still in Europe, Foden definitely starts getting reduced minutes then because he's such a key player. But right now, I just don't think Pep is going to do that. So I wouldn't put a lot of money on Foden definitely starting 32 and 33. But I do think it's a good possibility of it happening. So I have mentioned Aït-Nouri in videos briefly over the last kind of game week or two, but I probably haven't given him the airtime he deserves given the positions that he's playing for Wolves at the moment. A 4.7 million defender that's playing very advanced and getting chances as well. In fact, let me just double check here. So he got the goal against Burnley in game week 31, but he also scored against Fulham in game week 28. There was an assist against Sheffield United in game week 26. So the attack and returns are ticking over. And obviously, he's a nice price. Not only that, it's West Ham at home this week, Forest away in 33, and then Arsenal and Bournemouth double game week in 34. And even after that, let's say you've got no chips, it's Luton at home in 35 and Palace at home in 37 if you needed a single game week defender. So I actually think for someone without any chips at all, he's a pretty good transfer in. If you're looking to dead end 34, I quite like him. Like personally, I'm just not sure I'm going to get the chance to buy him because I've got double Arsenal for that double, and I'm probably going to go for a Liverpool defender instead, and a back three is probably where I'll land. But if you wanted to go, say, triple Liverpool attack or triple Arsenal attack or something like that, and you've got space for a defender like Aït-Nouri, then I really like him, right? If you are Well, you've probably, if you're going to use your wildcard, you've probably already used it. But if you're wildcard in Game Week 32, again, really good option. And we can see from, I'll just bring up the lineup here against Burnley, he was basically playing as a left-sided midfielder and very attacking, right? Now, how long will that continue for? Probably depends on the other injuries that Wolves have. Obviously, Cunha is back now. I'm sure we're going to see him starting soon. I think a lot of it relies on Hwang, because when Hwang's back, we could see Sarabia, Cunha, and him as a front three, and maybe Aït-Nouri moves back a bit. But I think, right, and Wolves fans, correct me if I'm wrong, even if he's not playing in an attacking role, like in the lineup, he's still going to be a fullback and getting forward. Because if we look at his minutes, and I could be wrong here, yeah, he started every single game since game week 23. So I think that will continue. Like, even if he's not playing as part of that attacking part of the team, right, if I can get my words out properly, he's still going to be getting forward. So I really like him. I can't really see too many negatives. Like, is he better in game week 34 than an Arsenal defender or like a Van Dijk? I don't think so. But he's not bad for the price at all. And there is absolutely a chance that he could outscore those players. And obviously, the less defensive players you got from those teams, the more you can put in attack. So, again, I've already spoken about my team, but there's no point in me transferring out those players I've already got. But if you're looking new and you could go, say, Aït-Nouri and Odegaard alongside Saka instead of, I don't know, Ben White and whichever, Sarabia, right? I think going for the Arsenal attacker and the attacking defender from Wolves, Aït-Nouri, could be a nice option. So, yeah, I'm sitting here trying to think of negatives, but if his minutes are good and he's attacking and the fixtures look decent as well, I'm not really sure there's too much of an issue. Like I've mentioned going for Everton defenders in game week 34, I don't mind like a Tarkowski or a Mikalenko for Forest at home and Liverpool at home, but they're not necessarily better than Aït-Nouri. And if anything, they're probably worse given how attacking he can be. So, yeah, I'm not going to ramble on any longer. I think he's just a really good pick. So another cheap defender that I wanted to talk about is Lewis Hall at Newcastle, who will only cost you 4.2 million. Now, it is worth saying he came off, I think it was in the, let me just double check here, 78th minute against Everton. And that is potentially with an injury, which wouldn't surprise me given the injuries at Newcastle at the moment. But I'm hoping that was just precautionary because he went down earlier in the game and then carried on playing. So hopefully they just took him off as a precaution and he'll be ready for game week 32. But I do think he's a potential solid long-term option. Whether or not he's a good transfer in this week, again, really depends on your chip strategy. It's Fulham away in 32, Spurs at home in 33, and Palace away in 34. I think if you had to play him against Fulham and Palace, that's absolutely fine. Spurs at home may be a little bit trickier, but obviously at 4.2 million, he's someone you can bench in those games. He's not a first or second defender. He's a fourth or fifth. And if you've already got Aït-Nouri, who, by the way, I think is a better option for the next 3 game weeks, and you need someone else cheap in your team, then after Palace away in 34, it's Sheffield United at home, Burnley away, and then in 37, it's Brighton at home, but that should be a double game week, and the other fixture will be Man United away, then it's Brentford away on the last day of the season. And I think at this point, right, it's fully viable to just steer clear of Newcastle defenders. They've got so many injuries, but also, if you want a cheap differential who's very attacking, then Lewis Hall should play because I just don't think they've really got anyone else. If we look at the injuries at the moment, like Botman and Lascelles are out for the season. So Dan Burn played centre-back against Everton. I think that will have to stick because the only other real option is maybe someone like Dummett. But I think at this point, Newcastle are not going to want to play him week in, week out. So the back line at the moment, like if Trippier comes back, it's going to be him right back. It's going to be Cher and Dan Burn centre-back. And then it's going to be Lewis Hall left back. I don't think they've got any other choice, right? They've got Alex Murphy, but I just don't see him getting game time unless more players get injured. So Lewis Hall should start while he stays fit for Newcastle. And the thing I like about him, especially from watching him for the few games he played for Chelsea and stuff like that, he's very attacking. And in terms of bonus points, he creates so many chances. He's often pretty good for them. I think he picked up 3 in a game against Everton. That was partly because he went off with a clean sheet and obviously no other Newcastle defenders got that. But generally, he's pretty decent. So for 4.2 million, you can't have super high expectations anyway. And I definitely don't think he's the best defender to bring in this week if you don't own someone like Aït-Nouri or maybe even an Everton defender because of their double in 34. But if you're free hitting in 34 and you're looking a little bit longer term, Newcastle defenders are something to consider. Like in 37, a potential double of Brighton at home and Man United away. So I think that's great for clean sheets. Absolutely not. But if you go back and look at my double game week video 437, none of the teams that are going to double that week have got particularly great defensive fixtures anyway. So at that point, if you do want double game week players, you're looking for those that are attacking. I think Lewis Hall fits that bill for 4.2 million. So it's going to require a certain chip strategy and a certain team setup to warrant him as a transfer in this week. But I quite like him if he's fit. Wait and see what Eddie Howe says on Friday. All right, let's talk about James Maddison next. And I do think he's starting to become a little bit of a worry from an FPL point of view because of his recent minutes. If we look at game weeks 29 to 31, he hasn't played more than 70 minutes in any of those games. Now, to provide a bit of balance, between game weeks 22, when he came back from injury, and game weeks 28, he did play 80 minutes plus in all of those. So it's not like I think he's a major worry and you've got to get rid of him. But why is he now starting to come off a little bit earlier? And the thing is, for all of those games, it was 65 minutes against Fulham, 67 against Luton, and 69 against West Ham. They're either chasing the game or looking for a goal to win the game. So against Fulham, it was already 3-0 when he came off. Maybe Ange Postecoglou just thought the game was done. There's no point in leaving him on. But against Luton, it was 1-1 when he came off. And against West Ham, it was obviously 1-1 as well. So you're chasing a goal and you take out one of your main creative outlets. Obviously, players like Son are going to go and get you that goal, but you'd expect someone like Maddison to create it. So is he coming off early because he's just not playing well enough? Or is it because he's carrying a knock? I don't know. Or maybe Ange Postecoglou just wanted to change things up because they were chasing the game. But you just wouldn't expect him to come off that early necessarily, not someone like James Maddison. So I think at the moment it's pretty easy not to buy him because at the end of the day, Spurs fixtures are Forest at home this week, which is pretty good to be fair. Newcastle away in 33, which is not bad given their defensive problems. And then they blank in 34, then it's Arsenal at home in 35. So I wouldn't probably buy him at this point. I'd want to see against Forest and Newcastle what happens in terms of minutes and then look at him possibly later on because he's still someone I'm considering for wildcard, but I don't have to make that decision until game week 35. If you own him, I think it's fair to be concerned, but I don't think I would sell him before Forest at home. It's just too good of a fixture. Even if he goes and gets 68, 69, 70 minutes, whatever it is, that could be enough to get returns. And all of a sudden, the outlook for game week 33 looks a bit better because you know that's not a bad fixture either. So I think I would keep hold of him. I guess it really depends who you don't own. Like if you've got Maddison in your midfield, which other midfielders do you not own, right? Is it Saka? Is it Foden? Like, is doing Maddison to Foden this week a good transfer? It is if you think Foden starts the next two games. Because obviously you get the fixture against Brighton in 34 as well. If you think you could get rested, it's probably not. You probably keep hold of Maddison. So I feel like for most people, if you've got Maddison, you either had no chips and you just played through game week 29 when Richarlison was injured, or you've wildcarded him in recently-ish. And in that case, I'd probably hold him for one or two more games and then decide. After 34, the blank, yes, it's Arsenal at home, which doesn't look great. It's Liverpool away in 36. But 36 will probably be a double that includes Chelsea. And then 37 will be Burnley and a double that includes Man City. And then it's Sheffield United away game week 38. So I don't think there's any need to panic on Maddison. But I do think he's someone that needs monitoring because the returns recently just haven't been there, and neither have the minutes. He did get a goal in game week 28, an assist in 27, one assist in 22 and 23. So there is a few in there, but probably not enough to justify a position in midfields at the moment. But if you've got him, probably keep hold of him. Forest at home on paper is a good fixture. If you've enjoyed that video, give it a like. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and rate 5 stars on podcast. I'll probably make this the only video today because there's not a huge amount of point in doing too much else until I see all the games. So tomorrow I'll do team selection early enough, and then I'll have final thoughts in the afternoon with all the press conference information, and I'll answer some of your questions as well. And then we'll do a deadline stream that will start at 9 o'clock UK time in the morning, of course, on Saturday ahead of 11 a.m. deadline for Game Week 32. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you again tomorrow.